I'm Lisa Lancer-Rose,
And I'm Ann Labar.
and this is This Animal Life. Today we're going to talk about cats. So I'm going to tell you this story, and I'm going to give you some of my sources, not for the story, but for some of the concepts that are behind it. One is Frans de Waal's Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are?
Oh, I like that.
That is a book. Yeah. And I often refer to Vicky Hearn's book, Anim's Task, Calling Animals by Name. She has a whole chapter on cats. It's called What It Is About Cats. So those two books and some articles list on the website, and of course, Wikipedia. And we're going to, I also referred to some videos. There were video interviews about this cat. And we'll share those with you on our website. But before I get to the story itself, I want to share a helpful new word. It is my new favorite word. I learned it in this investigation. I came upon it in Frans de Waal's Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? And the word is Umwelt.
Umwelt?
It's German. Yeah, it's spelled U-M-W-E-L-T.
Okay.
So it's always going to be italicized in English, and it's spelled U-M-W-E-L-T. So let me tell you about Umwelt.
Please.
Jacob von Uxküll is also German, in case you can't tell. He's a biologist, and he was born in 1864, died in 1944. And he was this champion of considering the animal's point of view, like if you're doing behavior, if you're a behaviorist, or, it was kind of an anti-objectivity, anti what's the word? Mechanistic view, and even opposed to the hierarchy of creation.
Yes.
It was if you were going to study an animal's behavior, it was important to look at its behavior from the animal's point of view, like to credit that, to give that higher status. So Umwelt, I think it literally means surrounding world.
Okay. So that's Veldt. I'm thinking of the Ray Bradbury story where the awful children put their parents in the Veldt.
Yes. My husband is South African, and Veldt is a kind of ecosystem.
Yes. Okay, so that would be where the lions live in the Veldt in the short story. That's why they call it the Veldt, because that's where the lions live. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, everything just makes sense now.
Yeah, I had a little thing here about, I can't find, oh, here it is. It's usually translated as self-centered world.
Oh, okay.
As he used it. The literal translation is surrounding world or environment, but as he uses it, it means self-centered world. So it's the assertion that organisms experience life in terms of species-specific spatio-temporal subjective reference frames.
Okay.
So you could look at it as the three blind men and the elephant when we talk about people that each have their own experiences or walk a mile in another man's moccasins. In this case, the three blind men, one says the elephant is like a tree trunk and the other one says the elephant is like a snake, and the three blind men aren't men. They're individuals of different species experiencing the same environment in each in their own peculiar ways. Umwelt reminds me of Thomas Nagel's famous 1974 essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? Which we'll probably reference again. That's basically about the limits of human imagination and objectivity, or the problem of assuming that you're being objective. Without the echolocation, the power of echolocation, and Nagel will say from birth.
Yes. Well,
we can never accurately and objectively imagine the consciousness of a bat. So our Umwelt does not permit us to complete and objective access to the bat's Umwelt. And it made me think of this blind guy who echolocates. Have you heard about him?
Yes.
Like he started echolocating as a child. Yeah. Oh, it's so fascinating. Anyway, he's probably the human best
the
able
bat boy.
to imagine what it's like to be a bat.
The Batman or the bat boy. Yeah.
Yes, and he trains other blind children to echolocate. He can ride a bike and all.
It's crazy.
It's awesome. Yeah, it is crazy. It's wonderful. Crazy wonderful. But even in his case, he can't imagine what it's like to be a bat. He can imagine what it's like. His Umwelt is being an echolocating
Right.
human.
Which is different, which would have to be different.
So, yeah. Also, is it that different? Because I think I read where they studied the brain activity of this guy, and the brain activity resembles our brain activity.
Yes, in that in the visual cortex.
What we thought were sight,
Yeah.
yes, what we thought was the visual
Right.
cortex is really a mapping spatial
Right. And that he
relationship
does in
cortex.
some ways see it. See what's
Exactly.
there, see the tree,
It's
see the
really
yeah.
it's redefining our assumptions about, or no, it's changing our
Yes.
assumptions about
Mhm.
sight.
And what that means. And well, when you talk about the other, we talk about dogs being colorblind or only seeing black and white, which isn't true, um but other animals, other mammals see colors differently than us as far as we can tell, but
Oh,
we don't
that's always a problem.
you can't how?
And that's a problem in my marriage
Okay.
because, well, what Albie calls green, I look at it and it is not green. I'm sorry, it's not good. There's nothing green about it. Like, why? And he's not colorblind. He is learning. I think it's more, here's where we get into the issue, and we are so off the
Yeah,
rails
I know.
right now. But this is really a language
Right.
problem.
Is a
Really, like what?
translation thing?
Yeah, no, no. What I mean is what he calls green, or what anybody calls green. We don't
Right, we
know
don't know what
really
they
what they
see. We don't.
know. We only know what green means in our
Yes.
Umwelt.
Right.
And sometimes we agree, and sometimes we consider divorce.
Over green. Gotcha. All right.
Before we're going to be talking Umwelt
Okay,
this whole
good.
time, but before we go any further, I have to recommend Nick DiChario's short story, I Am Mr. Baxter. Um, we're going to make that available to you on our website. Um, it is a little bit like Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, where Mr. Baxter wakes, or no, I'm forgetting who Mr. Baxter is, the cat. And Mr. Baxter's owner, it's told from Mr. Baxter's owner's point of view, he wakes up in the morning and he is Mr. Baxter. And Nick spent the whole story deeply inhabiting the Umwelt of a man who wakes up to find himself in a cat's body
Gotcha. That's wonderful.
and later encounters his own body with Mr. Baxter inside it. And Mr. Baxter is reacting to having woken up in a man's body. It is hilarious. It is fascinating. Nick did a very deep dive. And it's also quite suspenseful, and it takes some twists and turns that you do not expect. It is such a good ride. So, with a bow and a nod to the mastery of DiChario, I'm not even going to say another word about it because it's so good. I can't do it justice. Instead, I'm going to tell you the story of Oscar the therapy
Oh,
cat.
yay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's the kitty that I
Also,
think I know, but yeah, please.
uh, okay. So I mean, we're going to start and end with the human Umwelt because we can't help it. But, at several points, I'm going to try to do what Nick DiChario did and go
Oh,
feline.
okay.
All right, so let's see if this is the Oscar you think it is. Steerhouse Nursing and Rehabilitation Centers in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a pet-friendly nursing home. They have 41 beds, and they treat people who have end-stage Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, other illnesses. And these people, it's important to note, are generally unaware of their
Oh,
surroundings.
okay.
Okay. Yeah. Um, Especially the ones that Oscar seems to prefer. Oscar was
Point.
Oscar was one of six Is it the cat you think it was?
Yes, it is, but I mean, just the fact that they don't care whether you know they're there or not, but go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I find so much of this so fascinating, and that is one of them, especially when you start talking about the collisions of Umwelts.
Yes.
Okay. So Oscar was one of 6 cats they adopted in 2005. He is often described, and when I say often described, I mean that I read a whole bunch of articles that it would be too boring for you if I listed them all here out loud. And I watched video interviews with Dr. Dosa, who's the one who made Oscar famous. Um, and, you see Oscar and all, but in all of these accounts of Oscar's, uh, they say that he's not the friendliest cat. He does his own thing, you know? David Dosa even said, the last place you'll find him is in somebody's lap.
Oh, not a lap cat. Okay.
Yeah, but he's a therapy cat. Go figure. You go to the pound,
Yeah.
you get what you get, and like you said earlier, you let the cat be a cat. This is who Oscar is, right?
Right.
He's not quite a grumpy cat. Well, yeah, maybe he is a grumpy cat. Um, and as you know, I have an unfriendly cat.
Yes, you do.
My cat Audrey is
Yes,
she's
yeah.
dangerous.
I find it hysterical
She is so unfriendly that she is dangerous. Why does it
because,
amuse
well,
you?
because there's an attitude there. And as my Audrey story is that when I came to see you that one time, I stayed in the guest room, which I guess was Audrey's room, like where she hung out.
Well, it was
Right.
my
Well, she
daughter's
slept on
room.
that bed, I think. But anyway, she was
Yes, it was, she's my daughter's cat, or she used to be my
so
daughter's cat.
and I'm used to being a cat person, and cats will come up to me on the street and I can meow. In fact, I meowed my way to a skunk one time thinking it was a cat, which was very interesting, and that's another story. But, I can approach a cat, and cats usually love me, and we have conversations and in cat, and, I'm used to having little, witchy cat powers.
So you're fluent in cat.
I am fluent in cat, and we get along quite well. And Audrey wanted 1, nothing to do with me. 2, I was in her space. And then the morning that I woke up, you had these vertical blinds on the window, like long
Yes.
strips of whatever the plastic that they're made out of, and they turn.
Yeah, all the
Yes,
rage in the
right? So
'80s.
the vertical blinds, and she is staring at me and just, like, pulling them up, and they're going thwap, 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 and she's just I mean, just drilling holes in me.
Wow. I didn't know she was staring at you while she was doing
Oh,
that. That is so
yes. Oh,
menacing.
it was very menacing, and it was, "Wake the hell up. Get out
Yes,
of that
I bet
bed."
she learned that when she rattled them, my daughter woke up.
Probably, yeah. Oh, she was getting me out of there, but it made me laugh because I was like, "Wow, okay. I am not in your good graces at all."
No, and you were lucky because, um, we took Audrey to the vet. Like, the first time we took Audrey to the vet, they're like, "Get her out of her crate and put her on there's this medical surgical steel table,
Right, yeah.
examination table. You're alone in the room. I take her out, she's fine. I can handle her." So I'm holding her, and at this point, this is before I knew who I had. Um, we're waiting, I'm petting her, she's fine. And the door opened, and I think it was a technician, I don't think it was the vet proper, but a vet tech comes through the door, and Audrey leapt from the table at the vet tech,
Oh,
snarling. She was screaming, and her nails are out, and there was a brief scuffle with blood, and the vet tech was gone. And she said, "You're going to have to put her back in her crate, and we're going to have to gas her."
yeah.
Yeah. So after that, if she had to go to the vet, she came in her little carry case, and they just put the whole carry case down into like this gas
Oh
chamber.
my god, I didn't know they did that, and I worked at a vet.
Yes, Anne, I'm so sorry that I put you in danger like that.
Oh, no, that's fine. Good. Again, I find those
But
things funny, but
And the fact that a cat would launch from a table, right at somebody who's entering the room, I was led to believe that was not common.
No.
And then, that's expensive, and it's a little scary to have your cat knocked unconscious. They had 15 minutes they had to do what they were gonna do. She's older now, I don't wanna do that to her, so, but she did get a bunch of mats on her belly because I was afraid to groom her, and at some point, she didn't groom her. It was like her winter coat kinda got away from her,
Oh, okay. Yeah, because she's
and
sort of a long hair cat.
she is kind
Yeah.
of medium length hair, and, she always kept herself really well. But one year I noticed there were, like, these dreads on her belly, and I was like, "Whoa, I'm not touching that." So I called around and I found a grooming company or grooming, what do they call them? Salon. I found a grooming salon that, said that I called them up and I'm like, "Hey, I have this cat that doesn't like to be handled," and they're like, "Oh, no, we can do it. We handle all kinds of frightened, dangerous kitties." I'm like, Okay." So I brought her in, and the guy's really crowing about his talents, taming difficult
Yes,
cats.
much like me.
And Audrey was in her carrier on a chair when he came in to talk to us. And I mean, now I think about his body language. I mean, his chin was up, his back was straight. He's regaling us with stories of his successes. And he's saying, I've never had a cat that I could not groom. And he said, I'll just take her in the back now and we'll get to know each other. And he bent down to look in the crate and she kind of exploded against the mesh.
Demon
And
cat.
all the joy went from his face. He was shattered. Like his confidence was just gone. And really what it was is he was losing face
Yes. Yeah.
right then. And I could see, he thought for a minute. He's like, well, maybe you could carry her, at least like trying to reassess. And then by this point, while he's backpedaling, the room is full of this low growl. Like the room starts to hum. And he said, you know what? I'm sorry. I can't, I can't groom your cat. I did groom the cat myself. I discovered that she will let me touch her anywhere.
Oh, wow.
And I got all those nasty knots
Oh, good.
off her belly, all her intimate areas.
Oh, wow.
I was able to groom her. Yeah, I mean, it took weeks. Just I had to. Anyway, we don't need to talk about any more about Audrey. I just wanted to say I think it's important to think about what an unfriendly cat is, and Oscar was an unfriendly cat.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'll even tell you a little detail about the unfriendliness. But about animals in nursing home, Dosa says that animals in nursing homes are critically important. I'm quoting some article or other here. Good research shows that the presence of animals reduces depression or agitation among patients,
That's
provided the animal is not bloodying you, I guess, because our agitation went way up.
right.
But apparently, depression and agitation are measurable in patients who aren't communicative or who have dementia, and those levels go down just having the animal around, which maybe is why they kept Oscar.
Okay.
Even if he didn't sit in your lap and purr and so forth, just seeing him walk by,
Yeah.
or seeing him snoozing on a windowsill. There's a lot of good data that suggests that among healthier older adults, pets reduce heart disease and
Yeah.
hypertension and depression.
Yes.
So I remember my mother's doctor told her that she had just gotten rid of a cat. And he said, "Oh no, you should have a cat." So actually he recommended a dog, I think, but my
Oh.
mother went out and got another cat. Um, and also her cat Rosie was very unfriendly. I don't know if I'm Rosie's story is upsetting. So I don't know if I'll tell it today, but she was also unfriendly, but she was one of those scaredy cats that went and hid.
Ah,
Like, I would stay with my mother for a month, and I would
you would
see
never
Rosie
see her,
maybe
right.
twice. Right, yeah. But Audrey interesting, Audrey does not hide.
No.
Audrey's so there's an unfriendly cat because it's afraid, but then Audrey when I've had parties and Audrey's in the house, Audrey at some point when the party is, like, at its peak. Like everybody's talking, there's lots of crosstalk and movement, and it's lively, like at the height of its liveliness. Audrey enters the room. She will get up on the couch and like walk back and forth on the back of the couch. So I tell people to just don't touch her.
Don't reach out. Don't try and pet her.
No. There was a cat in my neighborhood. Incidentally, side note, Audrey is what you call strawberry tabby.
Okay.
She's an orange cat.
Yeah.
There was an orange cat in one of my old neighborhoods that was similar. Like if you were out walking on the sidewalk, she would come trotting up, or I can't remember what it was, but and you would think the cat was friendly. The cat would even like rub itself on your ankle.
Yeah.
And you could bend down and sometimes you could pet the cat, but you got like maybe 3 strokes, maybe 5 strokes. And then you got stitches.
Right.
So Oscar was born in 2005. I said that. He was one of 6 cats. He got famous because of a publication in the New England Journal of Medicine in the year 2007. Oscar was noted in this article to make his own ward rounds in the nursing home, and he would sniff and observe patients. He would be indifferent to most of them, and then he would decide to curl up on the bed only of certain patients at certain times. And the patients that he graced with his company in this way, this is
Right.
intimate company, would die within a few hours.
A few hours.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I thought it was like the next day or something, but wow. Okay.
No, within a few hours. So what he had done was curled up next to patients who had entered what you might call, I think, what is called active dying, which
Okay.
is such an interesting oxymoron. So the cat was so precise in his assessment of impending death. These are like phrases I'm getting from Pituos. Okay.
Right.
It's an article in the National Center for Biotechnology Information, which we will make available to you. He was so good at this that the staff developed a protocol that required the patient's family be called in if Oscar had curled up next to their loved one.
That's very helpful.
Yes. Um, the article said his mere presence at the bedside is viewed by physicians and nursing home staff as an almost absolute indicator of impending death.
Wow.
While I was thinking, relying on a cat to tell healthcare professionals when death is near doesn't seem so scientific, right?
Right.
But when I was Googling Oscar, the angel of death or whatever they call
Right.
it,
Reaper.
the Grim Reaper, Oscar the Grim Reaper, I did come up with some articles that were about, like he was just mentioned in passing or in the introduction, and the article was about how we need to do better. So determining the hour of active dying is not, we're not that good at it, or not
Right.
as good at it as we would like to be, because what you want to do is you want to call the family so
Right.
that they can gather,
So they can
you
get there
know?
in time. Sure.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so he was mentioned as we got to do better than this cat, like the cat upped the ante. So he raised the bar. So, some people wonder, like, why would you want that cat in your room? Or is the cat even causing, it reminds me of cats and babies.
Yes,
If you
they suck
newborn,
your
do you want?
breath.
Yes.
Old wives' tale. They suck the breath out of
Yes.
babies. Yeah.
What is that? The fear of cats, ailurophobia,
Ooh.
the irrational fear of cats. I looked into that a little bit because certainly Oscar is a cat you should be afraid of,
Yeah.
you know? And phobia of cats, ailurophobia, seems to be most common in people who were attacked by a cat at a young age. Like you meet Audrey when you're 4 and you're going to be
Oh,
afraid of
yeah.
cats. My students heard these stories of my cat, and they called her the flying chainsaw of rage. That was her nickname.
That's a
Somebody
great
actually,
nickname. I want that to be my nickname.
They even drew a cartoon of her on the blackboard that nobody would erase, you know? It's the flying chainsaw of rage. Um, but other people are afraid of cats for no good reason. And it's interesting to think about why. I mean, there are superstitions about black cats. There's the way they stare.
Mhm. Yes.
Uh, and Vicky Hearn in Adam's Task, she uses the term ailurophobia, but she uses it like the same way we use homophobia, loosely, to
Oh,
just
okay.
be like a bias against cats. She's identified a bias against cats. Like in science, people
Sure.
say, yeah, cats are going to screw up your data because they don't behave the way we think they should.
Right.
But okay, so you would think that people would be afraid of him. And some patients' families did in fact say, we don't want that cat in our room.
Right.
But most patients were or the families, because the
Right.
patients themselves have no idea that Oscar is in their room. Let's
Right.
just
They're
make that very clear right
right.
now. These particular patients in active dying, they can't know that Oscar is there. And if they do know Oscar's there, it's a warm kitten
Right.
next to them.
Right.
Um, and they don't know that he has this reputation in the
Right.
media. They have not been watching TV. So the family of one patient in particular said, it's not that we trusted the cat more than the nurse. Not exactly. It was, well, there was just something about Oscar. He seemed so convinced of what he was doing. He was so clear in his intention and his dedication.
Wow. That's
Yeah. So is this projection? Is this anthropomorphism?
uh,
We want to, inquiring minds want to know.
yes.
What do you think?
Animals have jobs. I mean, I would, I would prefer to think and would think that um, he was going to give comfort. That was the cat that he was. And that, had it been another animal, if they could smell active death, um,
Oh,
if it was another cat, he would have done the same. Um, so that's how I take.
interesting. That has thrown me for a little curve.
Oh, okay.
I like it. Yeah. Um, I had not thought of that. That is, I love that. Okay. Um, I do have more to tell you about his behavior and some theories
Okay.
that I came across. So Dr. Dosa is the one who published that article in the New England Journal of Medicine. He was a geriatrician at Brown University.
Okay.
Now, the article in the New England Journal of Medicine was about Oscar's ability to predict a patient's death.
Right.
And so, in that article, which I read, and in interviews later, he noted how extraordinary it was that the New England Journal, no, not in the article, but in an interview later,
Right.
he noted how extraordinary it was that the New England Journal of Medicine even published that
Oh,
article
yeah.
because it is just a human interest story. I found it and I read it. Later, Dosa published a book about Oscar,
Oh,
which is how he ended up like on the talk show circuit. The book is called Making Rounds with Oscar: The Extraordinary Gift of an Ordinary Cat. I did not read that
I
book,
want to
but I
read that
did
book.
read about that book. Yeah. Well, I will tell you about that book.
Yes.
Anyway, um, I in the New England Journal of Medicine article, the first behavior that we see from Oscar is him hissing at a woman who's walking past him. I think the woman had a walker and she's walking past him and he hisses at her. So he has a little Audrey in him. He's not orange though. But Dosa adds that it's not yet her time and he wants nothing to do with her.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. All he wants is people
Right.
dying. Day 236 of my captivity in the
Yes.
nursing home.
I will clear this
um,
place.
so the article is kind of like a field study of Oscar
Okay.
in the New England Journal of Medicine,
Wow.
right? Um, yeah, so Dosa kind of attempts to enter Oscar's Umwelt,
Okay.
but even as like in this phrase, it's not yet her time. He wants nothing to do with it. It doesn't feel like he's even trying to be objective,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, or he thinks he's being objective, inaccurate, but he's making some assumptions. You can
Oh,
just feel it in the language. Like
oh,
there's a
sure.
little romanticizing this. I don't
Mhm.
know.
No,
Um,
I that's what it sounds like.
okay,
Hmm.
so he talks a little about Oscar walking down hallways and snacking on kibble. Like he just sort of follows him. It's like we didn't have what are those cameras
Oh,
called?
the little
GoPros.
GoPro, yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to be Oscar's GoPro, or he's got a GoPro of his own, and he's sort of following Oscar around. And it's kind of sweet, you know. But he says all Oscar wants, and I am very interested in what Oscar wants, which is why what you said about him wanting to comfort a dying creature. Who knows what happened to him before he ended up in the shelter? Right?
Sure.
Maybe his own mom died.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sorry. It's not funny. Um, but he said all Oscar wants is to be alone and in control of his domain.
Okay. That's a cat.
Maybe that's all any of us
Yeah,
want. It's a cat
it's
thing.
a
Yeah,
cat
he's just a cat.
thing.
So he follows Oscar around, and that reminded me of that book. Do you know that book called The Hidden Life of Dogs?
Yes.
By Elizabeth Marshall
Yep.
Thomas. Yeah, she's an anthropologist and she follows. There's like a neighbor or friend had a husky that used to escape all the time. And she's like, where does that dog go? So she got on her bike and she followed the dog. And then she ended up with a whole book about it that got kind of popular at the time. I think she followed that dog like on daily rounds of 130 square miles,
Oh, wow.
which her observations required a hell of a lot more cardio than
Yeah.
than doses,
Yeah.
you know. But she was trying to find out like what do dogs want? If they're left to their own devices, what do they want?
Ah,
And the
okay.
answer was they want other dogs.
Okay.
Anyway, we still don't know really what Oscar wants. So Oscar, Dosa talks about Oscar jumping on a bed, he sniffs, and most of the time he leaves, right? Um, the sniffing turns out to be very important. And I think you jumped right to it. Smelling death
Yes.
or smelling pending death. And we'll come back to that several times here. But so I'm going to read a little passage from Dosa's article
Okay.
for you, just so you get let him tell you the story that made him and Oscar famous. So, making his way back up the hallway, Oscar arrives at room 313. The door is open and he proceeds inside. Mrs. K is resting peacefully in her bed, her breathing steady but shallow. She is surrounded by photographs of her grandchildren and one from her wedding day. Despite these keepsakes, she is alone. Oscar jumps onto her bed and again sniffs the air. He pauses to consider the situation and then turns around twice before curling up beside Mrs. K. Okay, so an hour passes. Oscar waits. A nurse walks into the room to check on her patient. She pauses to note Oscar's presence. I think all of these details are very important.
Yes.
The details that Dosa has chosen to share with us. Concerned, she hurriedly leaves the room and returns to her desk. She grabs Mrs. K's chart off the medical records rack and begins to make phone calls.
Wow.
Within a half hour, the family starts to arrive. Chairs are brought into the room where the relatives begin their vigil. The priest is called in to deliver last rites, and still Oscar has not budged, instead purring and gently nuzzling Mrs. K.
Wow.
A young grandson asks his mother, "What is the cat doing here?" The mother, fighting back tears, tells him, "He's here to help Grandma get to heaven."
Oh,
30 minutes later, Mrs. K takes her last earthly breath. Apparently, there are other breaths waiting
well,
for
heaven.
her. With this, Oscar sits up, looks around, then departs the room so quietly that the grieving family barely notices.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
So he doesn't leave until the patient dies.
right. So Dosa's book itself, I didn't, like I said, I didn't read the book itself, but I read about the book itself.
Right.
So it's not really about Oscar at all.
Okay.
It's about dementia and the families that
Oh,
it touches in the final stages.
okay.
And he uses Oscar, it seems to me, again, didn't read the book, but it seems like he uses Oscar as a kind of Virgil leading him through the inferno of end stage dementia,
Right.
you know? Um, Everyone says the book is moving, it's compassionate, it's highly informative, a must read if you are in a situation like
Oh,
this where you
wow.
have a family member facing, you and your family are facing this kind of loss. But it's not really about Oscar, and it doesn't have to be. It's about Dosa making rounds and sharing with you what he's learned
Okay.
about this stage of our lives, or this stage of our relationships with family members who suffer in this way.
Right.
So, um, everybody who writes about Oscar, and remember, this is like most of the articles you find about Oscar are right when he hit the airwaves.
Right.
And the central question for most of the writers and interviewers is, how does he know?
Hmm.
It's a more scientific thing, right? He's pretty consistent in his predictions. He's better at it than the staff is, and the assumption is that he's providing comfort,
Hmm.
which was your assumption too, and it may be right. But I want to know what it is he knows and what does he want.
Hmm.
Um, so why is this? I want to know, why is this antisocial cat seeking the intimate company of patients in their last hours of
Right.
life? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so these people, the people that he's curling up next and nuzzling, are not aware of their surroundings.
Right.
They aren't moving at all. They aren't vocalizing. Their biological processes have slowed down. There is really nothing to interact with, except it's like a water
Right. I was going to
bottle.
say
A
they're
water
still
bottle.
warm. They're still breathing. Yeah.
Most people, but how does he know that this is the stage that we've
Mhm.
gotten to, right?
Right.
Most people focus on the cat's sense of smell, which is what Dosa does. Every time he describes Oscar jumps up, sniffs the air, and leaves, and then
Right.
jumps up, sniffs the air, and goes aha, and
Yeah,
lies
right.
down. So he's assumed the sniffing is the key. Um, Another Dr. Daniel Estep is a certified applied animal behaviorist in Littleton,
Oh,
Colorado.
okay.
He says one of the things that happens with people who are dying is that they are not moving around much. So maybe the cat is picking up on the fact that the person on the bed is very quiet. It might not be the smell or the sounds, just the lack of movement.
Hmm. Okay.
And all right, a lot of people assume that cats are really selfish.
Yeah.
Like you did not assume that the cat was selfish. You assumed that the cat wanted to comfort
Right. Well,
a dying creature.
because through experience, I had a tomcat, a fully equipped tomcat, because like I said, we never did anything about him, um, who would literally babysit. So
Mm.
we would have a bunch of kittens, and of course, mom would go off. And the minute he heard the babies mewling, he would climb into the box with them and
Ah,
curl up with them, and
he
they would try to nurse, and they just, but he would hang out, he would keep them warm, until the mom came back, and then he'd leave. But
wow.
this is a male
So
cat
he's a
with
good dad.
testicles, you know?
That's wonderful.
So I've
See,
seen that behavior in some ways. Do you know what I mean? Like, why
okay,
is he
yes,
doing that?
providing comfort.
Why is he doing that?
Yes.
He's got no interest in
Um,
these kittens. They're probably not even his. So,
nice.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sure if you Google this, you will see cats curling up next to sick baby deer,
Oh, you're
you
right, or
know,
something, yeah.
fawns. Yeah, yeah. Um,
But yeah, what does he get
wow.
out of it? That's really interesting.
Um, but maybe, what did this daddy cat get out of it?
Well, yeah, I don't know because they're solitary animals. I mean, they're
Here's
social.
the thing. Right. See, my husband assumes that Audrey is just into anything for herself. Like if I coo at her, Audrey and I are very like
Right, you guys get along.
I can groom her hoo-ha, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like we are this tight. So, um when she comes over and wants me to scratch her, he says, "Oh, she just wants you to scratch her."
Right.
Um, but isn't that all we any of us
Yeah,
want?
really.
Like, like, aren't we in aren't we also like that's what I want from him,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Like, why are we here,
Yeah.
right? Um, and also it's so much more complicated than that because Audrey trusts me.
Right. Oh, she won't let me get near her.
Right. And that matters to me and it matters to her. And she has come to trust me because I am predictable, which we will talk about shortly. I think that routine is part of this,
Okay,
like what's
sure.
safe and what isn't. But so in the case of Oscar, if he's a skittish kitty, maybe the only people he can stand to cuddle with, maybe like all creatures need physical, some
Sure.
amount of physical
Yeah.
contact. But because he doesn't like walkers and and he
Whatever.
doesn't like people rolling over on him or whatever. So if they're
And pawing at
if
him.
they're not moving, yes, yes, thank you. So he knows this person is not gonna go, "Oh, look at the little kitty," and pet him. He wants to cuddle, he wants warmth, but living people annoy him. So, like, maybe he's a necrophiliac.
I thought that, but I wasn't gonna say it because he leaves as soon as
I
they
just went
die.
there.
He'd hang out if they, but yeah, no.
Yeah, so maybe he's leaving because 'cause they're starting to get cold.
Well, yeah, that's what I would assume.
The family members start wailing, it's just not cool anymore, the
Right.
party's over. Somebody's
Tough
gonna come move the
squawking.
body soon. Yeah. So, a couple other people were a little less what's the word? They weren't as likely to romanticize the situation.
Sure.
There's this professor of community health and medicine, Joan Tino at Brown. She works there. She says, I think he's following the patterning behavior of the staff,
Oh,
that routine that I'm talking about.
yeah.
She works there, like I said, and she says this is an excellent nursing home. If a dying person is alone, the staff will usually go in so the patient is not alone, and they hold a vigil.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so um, Oscar has seen this pattern repeated many times, and he may be mimicking it. And when you think, let's go into the Veldt a second. He's lying on the bed. He knows the person, or he chooses to lie there because the person is dying, and he knows that people are going to gather, and they're all going to. I mean, when you gather, I don't know if you've been with anyone who's
Yes,
dying.
yes.
Um, Everybody sits around the bed and stares at the bed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Oscar has become the star, and in a way, where he may think himself,
The
you
center,
know, he
yeah.
yes, well, he has put himself at the center.
Right.
Maybe, who knows what he thinks, we can't dare. But if you try to do a DiChario thing, you're curled up next to this unmoving person, and you know that when you smell these smells and the person isn't moving anymore, like all the things, when you know this is what this is gonna be. Because animals are very good at predicting. We all know, like the dog knows before you do when you're gonna take it for a walk
Right.
kinda thing.
Oh, yeah.
Um, the cat, because 'cause they're more observant.
Mhm.
I think of, we assume that the sign that we're about to take a ride in the car is like getting our car keys, putting our shoes on, grabbing our purse, but there may be other tells that we have that the dog is aware of,
Right.
we aren't. So, however the cat knows, he knows this is gonna happen. He knows that people are gonna gather around the bed and look and stare at the bed for a really long time. And if you think about if you have a cat and you're reading a book, you have a cat and you're working on your
Yes.
laptop,
Yes.
what does the cat do?
Lays on the book, lays on the laptop.
There you
Yeah.
go.
And the laptop's warm, so some people use that, but books aren't warm, and they will get
Right.
right on the book.
They wanna put themselves between you and what you're looking at,
Hmm,
in circumstances when you are very still.
that's true. Oh, that's really interesting.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I got there via the Umwelt.
Yeah.
But he okay, so, couple factors, complicating factors. This woman, Tano, she says animals are intuitive and we don't give them enough credit.
I
And then
agree.
she cites this example. Um, A resident had a blood clot in her leg, and her leg was ice cold.
Ooh.
And Oscar wrapped his body around her leg and stayed until the woman died.
Oh. Okay, well, that goes against the body heat
Oh.
thing.
Ooh, yes, it does. Good noticing, Anne. I used to say it to my students, good noticing. It is good noticing. I wonder, just given what we just talked about, because I didn't think of this when I read this multiple times before. People were probably looking at the leg.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Well, that's consistent. Okay.
All right, so the door, some people wanted the door closed. They didn't want Oscar in there, particularly the family,
Sure.
especially probably once it was in the news, like this is the Grim Reaper of cats and the angel of death with whiskers or
Right.
whatever. So um, they would close the door to keep Oscar out, and Oscar would pace frantically outside the door.
Wow.
Yes, an employee said, "It's really something to see. I believe animals have a sixth sense." Oscar gets pretty upset if he's not allowed in the room.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
cats don't like closed doors, but
Of course, that's right.
um however, this is a specific closed door. I'm sure there are other closed doors that he could be like pawing at um at the same time. This one's closed.
See, I'm so glad you said that, Anne, because remember there are 5 other cats at this nursing home.
Yeah,
Why aren't they lying on
right.
bodies? Like, why aren't nursing homes that allow cats, why aren't all the cats doing this?
Right.
Okay. That is something we have to reckon with here.
Mhm.
Most families who have Oscar curled up next to their loved one who's dying say that Oscar was a source of great comfort. So, how does he know? A lot of people talk about pheromones, ketones, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. They assume that Oscar's attracted to the scent, but like I said, why aren't the other cats coming when they smell that? And also, the assumption is that because Oscar's doing this, he has this unique ability, but maybe all cats have it and they just aren't getting anything out of it.
Well, yeah, and that's cats have personalities. Maybe other
Right.
cats
So,
smell that
Oscar,
and don't wanna be anywhere near it.
right. So, why does Oscar want to be near it?
Yeah.
Um, and even Dosa says, I forget where I saw this. It doesn't, the sense of pending death might be the cue, but it doesn't explain the behavior.
Right.
So if he's responding to a smell, that might be, said Dosa, but there's something more to it because he doesn't leave until the undertakers come.
Wow.
So I had to go looking deeper for, people who specialize not in geriatrics, but
Right.
in animal behavior. And there wasn't a lot out there, but Smithsonian Magazine had a look at it.
Mhm.
Some writers at Smithsonian did a thorough search, and they noted that no one has actually studied Oscar in any formal way.
Okay.
They just combed over the literature like I did, and they found the same thing I did. All we have are anecdotes.
Yeah.
Here's this antisocial cat doing this extraordinarily valuable social
Right.
thing. So here are some explanations that I thought of, and we already touched on one that cats like to interpose themselves
Right.
between anything you're looking at, which I would like to talk about more in a second. But the first explanation that Smithsonian came up with, and that I thought more about, was confirmation bias.
Right.
It's the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information that supports your beliefs and values.
Right.
It's not anything we Americans do
Oh, no,
right
ever.
now,
No. No.
or law enforcement
Right. No.
does. Okay. In this case, there's no cause and effect association at all between Oscar's behavior and anyone's death,
Right.
other than chance. Like Oscar lives in a nursing home, people are dying all the time.
Mhm.
Dosa has called this the Oscar effect, like where people come and gather because Oscar's there, I
Right.
think. But,
Right.
it might just be superstition or something like superstition.
Right.
So you noted a coincidence, like he happened to be on the bed of a couple people who died. And, for any one of the reasons that we saw, like they're just really still. And he's like, oh, finally somebody who meets my particular intimacy needs.
Right.
Um, and then they're like, "Wow, that person died." I was thinking if what would this story even be a story if Oscar were a black cat?
Ooh, that's a
Yeah.
good point too, because then there would be, it might have been interpreted as the cat's the reason they're dying.
Yes. Yes, it was bad luck.
Right.
Yeah, I should have said Oscar is a really good-looking cat. Not that I mean, I've had black cats, they're beautiful, they're pantherine.
Oh, yeah, I love
I
black cats.
didn't mean that. Me too. And my daughter has a black cat now. One of my favorite cats ever was, Haku, who I'm gonna talk about in a minute, and he was a black cat. This so you can have a handsome black cat. Oscar is a handsome white cat, and he's white with big gray markings. He's sort of
Oh, okay.
evenly, yeah, it's got, like, a nice balance of gray and white. He'd be, like, one of the first cats that your eye would be drawn to because of his pleasing balance of color. That's why he was adopted, I'm sure,
Right.
because he's pretty.
Right.
Um, but I think maybe because of his appearance, people had their guard down about this coincidence. So a
Okay.
couple of coincidences seem to happen, and they ascribed significance to it for whatever reasons. Like maybe other
Mhm.
cats had been sleeping next to people, but they were friendlier cats, and you didn't, you only noticed it because Oscar wasn't friendly.
Right.
This was unusual behavior for him. And then after that, you only notice when he's right that they died, and you forget when he did it and he wasn't. That's the theory, the confirmation bias theory that also, not only does he make rounds, he just walks as cats do. They patrol, right? So every cat in the place is patrolling. Every cat is probably also sniffing the air,
Yeah.
right? I
Sure.
mean,
Looking for tuna, looking for a snack. Sure.
or even just like checking out. Y-
The other cat that was there.
Yes, we don't know. Um, yeah, Vicky Hearn talks about cats and their umwelt. But let me just dispense with the next theory, which is the clever Hans fallacy, is when was named after Clever Hans, who was a famous horse who could do any math problem. And you would throw like calculus at him, and he would stomp the answer out. And people were like, wow, he's doing math
Right.
and he's always right. Wow. And then it became apparent through some testing, which wasn't done with Oscar,
Right.
that he was watching the body languages of the onlookers
Okay.
because they all knew the answer, or the person who asked him the
Right.
question knew the answer, and their body language would slightly change, and he would stop. So he knew there was a tail, there was a cue to stop. He'd ask the
Right.
question, he'd start stomping. He's looking for when should I stop, and they tell him when to stop,
Right.
unknowingly tell him
Yes.
when to stop.
Right.
Yeah. So think about it, in this community, people really want to know when death is imminent
Oh, yeah.
so they can contact the
Right.
family. So Oscar might not be predicting the death, but predicting when he was going to get approval from the people he lived with,
Oh, okay.
because they're all going to stare at him. That's what he
Yeah,
wants because he's a
exactly.
cat. um, and I thought of that because of Haku. I had this black cat, like I said, and I loved this cat in part because of this behavior of his. One day I caught him in the garage and he was worrying something,
Okay.
and it was a teeny tiny snake. Now, we have in Florida, we have a snake that is, as an adult, is no bigger than an emaciated worm.
Okay.
It, it's like 2 inches long. I can't remember what it's called. So at first I thought that's what it was, but then it wasn't. It had markings. It had like this pattern on it, and I am one of those people that has every Audubon field guide.
Right.
Like I want to know the name of that cloud, and I want to know the name of that wildflower. So especially animals. So I got one for fish and
Yes, it'll be.
all the things. So yeah. So I was like, hang on, Haku, I'll be right back. And I ran and I got my Audubon field guide to reptiles and amphibians. And I crouched on the floor with him. Okay. So here, let's get into the Umwelt. He finds something really cool. And then I come running and I stare at it too. So Haku and I are staring at this snake together, and he would pull it a little bit away, and then I wanted to look at it. So I would pull it back and I would turn it over and I would pick up and look at its little head, and I'm flipping through the book and I put it down while I'm flipping through the book and he would pull it away. I don't know how long we spent doing this, but it was probably a really nerdy long time because I could not find what this snake was. And that's because it was an infant or a newly hatched black racer.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, I mean, I did eventually identify it, but I had to read all the things. I had to say, okay, well, it's not an adult snake like that teeny one. And I got to start looking at, are they marked differently when they're newly hatched? And I found it. And I had black racers in my garage more than once. If we ever do an episode on snakes, I have to talk about my relationship with black racers. So it was a baby black racer. And after I identified it, I threw it out. Okay. So I don't know what time of day that was, but coincidentally, I had this braided leather hippie belt, like it had tassels on the end, and I never wore it because it's a bit much, even for me. But it's a great cat toy because you can kind of whip it back and forth, and
Right.
it snakes along the floor and it has the tassels on the end. And so we used to play with Haku with that. And it was lying somewhere around the house. So that night, I'm getting ready for bed. I'm up in my bedroom. There's a 2-story place. This is the place where later Audrey tormented you.
Ah, yes.
Same place. So I'm getting ready for bed and I hear this ungodly sound that I have never heard before. It was, I'm going to try to make it right now. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but here I go. It was like, you can cut that, please. And I was like, what the hell is wrong with Haku? You know? And it kept going on, and I looked over the railing, and there he is walking through the living room, and he's dragging that belt.
Ah.
And yes. And so I watched him until he disappeared under the floor. I was on a balcony and he went underneath me and I couldn't see him anymore. And he's yowling the whole time that he's dragging this thing. And he comes up the stairs and he brings the snake to me.
Right.
Okay. So I said, good boy. Thank you. Because I knew that cats are said to bring gifts,
Yes.
right? I read, I think it might have been Vicky Erin, that cats they teach their young how to hunt.
Right. They're
They are
trying to
trying to
teach.
teach you how to
Yeah,
hunt.
that's what's really going on. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so he's like, wow, my student is showing interest in killing snakes. But I mean, why the yowling? And he brought it to me. Anyway, Anne, every night after
Oh,
that,
no.
that was part of our bedtime routine is as I was getting ready for bed, and the original snake was daytime. I did not go to bed afterwards,
Right.
but he closed his day every day by bringing me a snake, a fake snake. And that is a very social behavior that he initiated.
Right.
What did he want? Did he want the two of us to crouch on the floor and examine the snake again? Did he take so much pleasure in that shared experience of examining the kill
Right.
that he wanted to repeat it? So Smithsonian says of Oscar, it's possible that Oscar may simply be responding to the nurses and the staff activity related to the patient's condition. For example, patients who are near death are likely to have more activity in their rooms for the obvious reasons that nurses pay extra attention to those who are in danger of dying than they do medically stable
Sure.
patients. Oscar may visit those beds more often simply because there's more going on there
Hmm.
when
Okay.
the patient seems especially unwell. So, there was more going on there. Like, when had when had Haku ever done anything that I came over and shared with the same fascination that he had
Right.
for, it's kind of like men gathered around a grill
Right.
at a cookout.
Or even a fire. Yeah.
Yes. So, so Oscar may know that when the patient is in this condition, there will soon be a lot going on here. And he likes the activity and the attention. So he lies there waiting for it, you know?
Yeah.
So um, the cues may be odors, it may be the stillness, but he's not there to comfort the dying. His motive may be the same as it was for Clever Hans and Jim the Wonder Dog, that he likes that once or twice he got a certain kind of attention
Okay.
for lying there. And he probably got it because he didn't usually lie next to people. And now he wants everybody to sit and stare with him, like Haku did.
Right.
Why did he like it? Vicky Hearn in Adam's Task, in her chapter on cats, says that cats have a feline interest in and focus on our pleasure. Now, that chapter is pretty philosophical. It's later in the book, and so it makes references to concepts and studies and all that she's referenced before. So it was a bit of a challenge to read. She's a professor of philosophy and linguistics and
Oh,
all that.
yeah.
So yeah, it was, it was a deep dive,
Sure.
if you will. But he says, Hearn says that cats behave badly during experiments because of the way humans behave during experiments.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. She overheard a scientist say, "Don't use cats; they'll screw up your data." She says that's at that point I would want to study cats
Right.
if they why are they screwing up the data? If you really want to understand animals, but she said once cats figure out the researchers want them to push a lever, they'd rather starve than push the lever. And her, I read this chapter a couple of times in anticipation of this conversation. Near as I could tell, cats hate being deprived of social cues. So if you're a scientist, you're trying to be objective. She talked about don't emit brainwaves, like that was something that they said to each other. But you're always going to be emitting brainwaves, right?
Yes.
The brainwave, if you're a scientist trying to be objective, those are the brainwaves you're putting out.
Right.
And cats are trying to read the behavior around them all the time. The Veldt of a cat is highly alert.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And it receives pleasure, or which she calls strokes, from the input. Even though they sleep 23 hours a day,
Right.
what they hate is novelty. They like novelty, like you put a box on the table.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
like, oh, a box. So like wake up and come check out the box, or anything you put in the environment that's
Right.
new. Dogs are going to bark at it.
Right.
If it's new, it's not supposed to be there. But so they're like always scanning. And when everything is the same, like they've already read all of the information, the smells, the sounds, the vibrations in their whiskers, and everything is status quo and safe, they will sleep. Or they can walk out safely in the middle of the room.
Right.
But the environment includes us.
So how much are we included in that environment? Do we become so much of that environment that it's something to protect, defend, give your life for? Or at least one of your 9 lives? Join us here next time for Today We're Going to Talk About Cats, Part 2. To explore more of this animal life, please subscribe, rate, and review. It would help us immensely, and we will be eternally grateful. Go to www.thisanimallife.com for more links and information on this and other episodes. Our music, as always, was composed and performed by Chip Salerno. Find more of Chip's music on SoundCloud.com. Until next time.